Today we are going to talk about thread and how thread should come off your spool or your cone. Also, we're going to talk about how it's a lot like something you use every single day. That's right, stick around and find out how it's like toilet paper. Today specifically, we're going to look at the two different types of winding on a spool as seen here in a picture. We're also going to talk about how to properly put these threads through your machine so that they're threaded properly. Thread that is going horizontally across your spool is often considered straight wound, stacked wound, or parallel wound. When you see thread going in a diagonal pattern on your spool or cone, usually this is referred to as a crisscross wound spool or cone. Cones usually always are crisscross wound. Okay, let's do an experiment. Let's pretend that this paper towel holder is actually a spool pin. And so sometimes the spool pin will be vertical, and sometimes on your machine the spool pin will be horizontal. And so depending on which way this spool pin goes depends on which thread you use on your spool pin. So let's start off by talking about the straight wound thread. Okay, the straight wound thread. When we look at a vertical pin, if we were to take toilet paper and pretend like it was straight wound thread on a spool and we're putting it on our spool pin, what we do is we want to take it from the side of the spool. So let's watch how we take it. So here it goes, it's going into the machine, and you notice that that thread is really, really straight. Now, let's look at it if a straight wound spool actually went on a horizontal pin. Now, normally there would be a spool cap that would go over top and it would hold it, but I'm just going to hold it with my fingers. And typically the spool should not be rotating around. It should be staying put, and the thread should just be coming off the top of it. So here we go. We're going to see what happens. So I'm going to hold onto it with my hand. It's come off this way. I'm going to hold onto it with my hand, and I'm not going to rotate my hand. Watch what happens with the toilet paper. And of course, it's coming off. Look what's happening to your thread. Can you see that? That's right, there's a twist. Now that twist should not be in your thread. It's because it's coming off the spool the wrong way. The straight wound thread is coming off the top of its spool and it's causing a twist in the thread. That causes tension issues. It also causes a lot of breakage of your thread. So you do not want this. This is bad. This is what you have problems with and you can't figure it out. What's that last thing? I've changed my needle. I've done all the things. I've adjusted my tension on top and bottom and I can't figure it out. Maybe this is it. Now, let's pretend that we have the same thing with our crisscross. Our crisscross, because it has to come off the top, when you pull it off the top, it actually unravels properly and there's no twist in the thread. But if you have it so that it's rotating off of the cone or the spool this way, when I let this go, and you should try this at home, it actually puts a bend in it again, another twist, because it's not supposed to come off the side of the cone or the spool. So when I drop this, it actually unwinds really, really quickly. And so that is what we want to avoid. We want to avoid the twist in our thread that we see with the toilet paper example. We don't want that twist. That's what causes tension. That's what causes our machine to get all angry and yells at us and all this stuff. So what we want to remember is that if we have a straight wound spool, straight needs to come straight off the side of this spool. If we have a crisscross wound spool, this spool, the thread should be coming off of the top. So crisscross off the top, straight off the side. Write it on a Post-it, try to remember it. This is going to save you a lot of grief. On my newer machine, to put my straight wound straight on this bobbin, it won't come off straight. It will come off the top. And so what I need to do is I need to figure out a way to make it go straight. Now, this machine happens to have a pin adapter, and I end up putting it here on my bobbin winder. I just push it down, and I can put this right on top and thread it like I would normally thread it. As you can see, it's coming off the side, so there's no problem. If you don't have a vertical spool pin similar to this that you can just adapt with these new machines, another clever way that you can use a straight wound thread is to put it in a dish. Lie it on its side and ensure that the thread is coming up straight so that when it pulls, it is going to bounce around a little bit, but it's not going to be too bad. Then I suggest getting one of these stands. This is a spool stand. They're fairly inexpensive. You want one that's weighted at the bottom, mostly metal, that you can either just keep behind your sewing machine. Some of them even have screw holes that you can screw right down to your table, but I like to move mine around too much, so I don't. I leave mine freestanding, but it doesn't tip over like the plastic cheap ones, so make sure you get a really good solid heavy one. And what I do is I put this bowl right beside it, I grab the thread, I bring it up and through the loop, and then what I do is I bring my thread over to my machine and I will thread it as I normally do. A fun tip about crisscross thread is that this spool should never be rotating. It should not rotate like your stacked or straight thread. It should perfectly come off the top, which means that this spool should never rotate around. It wasn't meant to. And you can definitely tell when you go to use a cone. These cones, if they were to sit and drag and rotate off the side, there's a lot of drag on the bottom. That's going to cause a ton of tension issues. So whatever you do, do not make these come off the side. These crisscross, obviously you can put it on the pin, but if you don't have a pin that will hold your cones, that is where these stands are so handy. You just take this, drop it right here on the pin because it doesn't actually have to be stabilized much. It just needs to stand still and not tip over. So you run this up to your stand, loop it through the loop at the top, and then bring it close to your machine and thread your machine just like you would normally thread it. If for some reason you haven't gone out and bought yourself one of these handy dandy stands, what you want to do is just get a jar. Get a pretty one, because why not, right? Pretty jar, put it behind your machine, drop your spool in, and then you're gonna thread it through the top of your machine the same way. Now, I personally find this a bit cumbersome. There is going to be drag. It might even get caught up on your handle. So ideally, this is the way to go. These stands are so valuable. So I would just bring my thread up and over the top and thread my machine as usual. When using a crisscross thread, make sure that the spool end that has the area that is used to tuck your loose ends away, there's always one end. And either it'll be something like this with teeth that'll grab, or it'll be a slot that's in the side of your plastic. Make sure that that is the end that is not where your thread is unwinding off the top, because it will catch on those teeth. So you can see this is the end that has the teeth. This one does not. That is how I am going to put it on my spool pin. So whatever you use, crisscross or straight, whatever is in your stash, they both will work. It just depends on how you use them and how your machine is receiving these threads. That will eliminate so many tension issues and breakage issues. You will be so impressed. So remember, crisscross off the top, straight off the side. Make sure that you have them properly loading into your machine so you eliminate all the crazy. Good luck, and thanks for watching.